In this episode of If It Ain't Broke, Don't Fix It, we're turning your kitchen into a pizzeria, and it smells great in here. Welcome back to the kitchen, guys. Today we are starting a special little mini-series, if you will, a sub-series within the channel that I am entitling If It Ain't Broke, Don't Fix It. The whole point of that is it's going to be recipes that come from my past, from my family, from my days in restaurants, from my travels, and some really cool recipes that I've created just to show you guys here that I love. And they are not going to be part of the Portion Fix category. These are going to be traditional recipes. Like I said, a lot come from the past, and I just want to show them to you guys because I think that they're wonderful and I want to share them. So we're calling it If It Ain't Broke, Don't Fix It today. And we are starting off, I thought, let's start off with something near and dear to my heart and to my family's heart. Now, some of you may know I grew up above my dad's pizzeria. That's where I cooked when I was a little kid. It's the first place I ever cooked and where I first learned how, and I developed my love of cooking. And my dad's pizza was legendary. And I have right here, this is the original sign, one of the original signs from his restaurant, Bobby Cal's. It was in Cleveland, Ohio. The pizza was so beloved. Every time I go back there, people stop me in the streets, people sometimes that I don't even know, but they recognize me and they say, when are you gonna bring your dad's pizza back? Well, I haven't had an opportunity to do that, but I'm gonna do them one better. Today, I'm gonna teach you guys exactly how that beautiful pizzeria style pizza was made. I'm pulling out all the stops, I'm showing you all the tricks, and I didn't even ask my dad's permission. He may or may not see this, I don't know, but you're gonna figure out how it was all done on this episode of If It Ain't Broke, Don't Fix It. So let's get to making some pie. We are, of course, gonna start with the most important ingredient, the dough. This is the best part of the pizza. It is the part you definitely wanna get right, and the part that probably the most people struggle with, but I've really broken it down to make it super easy for the home cook. We are going to begin with our water. We have a little bit of sugar going in. I've given you all the measurements below, and I've given you the measurements in both cups, volume measurements, and weight. If you have a scale, I highly recommend you use the weight measurements because doughs can be very finicky and cups can be very inaccurate. So bakers always use weight. Anytime you're doing this, especially when you're doing a leavened dough where you have to wait several hours for it to rise, you don't want to get it wrong because it wastes your day. So if you have a scale, I highly recommend you use it. That's why I gave you weight measurements. So we got the sugar in the water. We have our instant yeast. And we have a little bit of olive oil. Real simple dough, but the proportions are just right. Whisk it up. You want to get a good whisk. It's important to dissolve that sugar, dissolve that yeast. You don't want the yeast to sink down and stick to the bottom of the glass, because then when you add it to the flour, if there's yeast stuck down on there, how are you going to get it off? You can't put more water because you already put the water that's measured. So you're not going to be able to rinse that cup out. So make sure you whisk it well, get it all dissolved, and that's why I use a clear thing so I can look at the bottom before I dump it and make sure there's no yeast sitting on the bottom. That's in. That's going to start that yeast reaction. It's going to start to eat the sugar, it's going to get hydrated, and it'll start to move. Now we have our flour. Probably the most important ingredient in this whole recipe. I am using King Arthur bread flour. That's super important. One, you have to use bread flour because it has a high protein content, and that is going to give you the stretch and strength you need to make a proper pizza. I really recommend King Arthur. It's a great flour and it's available at almost every grocery store. If you don't use King Arthur, your results, as long as you use bread flour, will probably be very, very close to King Arthur, but make sure you use bread flour. Don't use an all-purpose. Definitely don't use a bleached, and if you try to use gluten-free, it's not going to work at all. So definitely use your bread flour and add your salt to your flour first. There's a reason why we're doing that instead of putting it in with our liquids, and that is that salt, when it comes into direct contact with yeast, can damage or kill the yeast. But when you coat it with flour first, that protects your yeast. So that's an important step. You're going to see throughout this process, I'm always protecting the yeast, nurturing the yeast, because this dough is a living product. Yeast is alive, and that fermentation is the key to the whole thing. So we have our water mixed. Everything is starting to look nice and hydrated and dissolved. I'm going to use a countertop method here. I wanted to do this by hand so that anybody that doesn't have a mixer can do it. I actually prefer to do it by hand, and I always do it that way myself, even though I have a mixer. I just think I get a better product. If you want to use your mixer, you can. Just put this all in, run it at a medium speed for about 7 minutes, then turn it out on your counter, hand knead for a minute or two. That'll get you the results close to hand kneading. But really, I recommend a hand knead here. You can do it all in one big bowl if you want, but I'm going to do it on my countertop. It's my preferred method, and we're going to see why in a minute. I'll talk us through it. So, flour goes out. Flour and salt are on the board. Now we are going to fare la fontana. That means make the well. I use the bottom of my bowl. I just do a little spin till I get down to the counter. Take my hand, extend that well out, making a nice edge. A little bit of flour in the center, but mostly counter. Now we've got our water. One last whisk, just to make sure. And into the center we go. Nothing to be afraid of here. Take a fork, 2 tools here, bench scraper and a fork. I make all my doughs this way: pizza dough, pasta dough, bread dough. You start to gradually draw the flour in and mix it with the water. Now you might get scared thinking, oh no, the borders are breaking down. But the more flour I put in here, the thicker the water gets. We will eventually end up with a batter. That batter will not run, and we won't have to worry. But this allows me to incorporate the flour slowly to get it fully hydrated, and then bring a little bit more in and get that fully hydrated. It makes for a really even hydration on the dough. It builds our protein structure slowly, and it gets it aerated. We're mixing bubbles in there, and we want that. It's good for the yeast, and it's good to make an airy dough. We can see we're already starting to get more of a batter. Just take a little bit at a time. Nothing to be afraid of. As you can see, we've already gotten to the point where it's stopped wanting to run all over the table. I haven't broken down my borders yet. Let's get this flour mixed in. We have a nice thick batter. And we're getting to the point where we are going to start to use our scraper. Make sure that when you get rid of this fork, you don't leave excess on there. That's all part of the dough. We've measured it out. You want that in your dough. So get that off your fork, clean fork. Now, if anyone's ever made like Southern biscuits and they've cut soft butter into flour, it's the exact same process. We're going to create small pea-sized bits of hydration, going back and forth, crosshatch pattern. Mix flour in, back and forth. This again is allowing me to hydrate the flour really evenly, really controlled way, and it's going to build the perfect dough structure. You can see we're starting to get everything incorporated. Another nice thing about this is you don't get a bowl that's covered in stuck-on bits that don't become part of your dough. And you're not going to end up with stuck-on bits on your counter. You'll see that we're going to end up with a clean counter. Everything will be mixed in. Now that I have more of a dough, I'm folding, I'm pressing down, and I'm just hitting it with the edge. I'm going to do this for a little while to keep my hands clean, and then I'm going to switch to my hands once the scraper isn't doing it anymore, which is about now. Again, clean your scraper. Make sure you get everything off. I'm going to use that some more as we go. Now I'm going to start, this is a wet dough. I'm going to take my wedding ring off. This is a wet dough. Pizza doughs, bread doughs need to be wet so they can properly rise. They're not like pasta doughs where they're very dry. Working with sticky dough is nothing to be afraid of. You want to minimize surface area contact with your fingers in the dough. So using fingertips, not your whole hands. Just pressing with my fingertips. Spreading that out, turning it back on itself, spreading it out again. Once I do that, I'll turn it 90 degrees, turn it back on itself, fold it on itself, and keep working. Fingertips, not the whole hand. You're going to see as this develops, it's going to get stickier at first, and then as the proteins get worked, it will get less sticky. It will want to stick to itself more than it wants to stick. I'm picking up excess flour. More than it wants to stick to my hands or the counter. We are going to work this dough for 5 minutes. A lot of people think you need to work it for 10-15 minutes. But there are 2 ways that you develop proteins in a dough. 1 is kneading, which we're doing now. 2 is resting, which we are going to incorporate a rest stage into this. That rest stage will make it so that we don't have to work our dough for 15 minutes. 5 minutes is going to be plenty, and you're going to see what a beautiful dough we get. But make sure you do a good 5 minutes. Don't do 2.5 minutes and tell yourself, I think that was 5. Set a timer if you need to. Hold yourself accountable for the 5. It's a short knead. It's not a lot of time. And it's going to give you the results. You can see at this point, the dough has reached kind of max stickiness. And it wants to hold on to my fingertips. So I'm not fighting it. I'm working with it. Stretch. I'm using this kind of figure 8 motion. I just stretch it back, out, back on itself. Wrap it up again. Keep going. Alright, we are about there, guys. Now this dough, I don't know if you can see it, I feel it with my hands. It's wanting to stick to itself so much more than it did before. Before it was all stuck to the board. Now it really wants to ball up and hold on to itself. And it's starting to get smooth looking. It won't be perfectly smooth at this point. That's where the rest comes in. But we are at the point where we can move along to our rest. Get all the dough off your fingers. Quick move like that. Pick it up. Ball it up. Just a, general round ball. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. We are going to rest this dough covered for 15 minutes. Let me grab my cover. I like to use just a simple bowl over the top. That'll keep a humid space under there. The dough can't dry out. And I don't have to put plastic wrap over the top, which might stick to it. And a damp towel only kind of works. This creates a nice airtight seal. It has been 15 minutes, and let's check in on our dough. We're not expecting any rise at this point. We've just let it rest to let those proteins develop. Now you're going to scrape it off the counter, pick it up. I can already feel that it's less sticky. And I'm just going to start to ball it. Look how smooth it's getting. You see that smooth? That is perfectly smooth dough, perfectly developed protein, exactly what we want. See that rest? That's so powerful because now you don't have to knead for 15 minutes. You only have to knead for 5. Now one thing is it's important to get a tight skin on this dough. And we do that by tucking it under and rolling. Tucking it under and rolling. Tucking it under and rolling. You see how it's tightening up? That tight skin helps form that protein structure that holds the dough together while it rises. Now we got a nice tight ball. You can leave this on your counter. I'm switching to a cutting board just so I can move it around and get it out of my way when I need it to be. Again, I'm just going to tuck it one more time before I pick it up. Right onto our board. You don't need to flour the surface. It's going to be just fine. Cover it again with your bowl. Make sure that's airtight. we're going to have a 2-hour rise, or until the dough ball has doubled in size. Rise times can vary a little bit with the temperature of your kitchen and the humidity, so you can check it to see if it's doubled in size, but if you're not sure, just let it go that full 2 hours and you will be good to go. While that dough is rising, let's talk a little bit about equipment. But first, a quick discussion just about this recipe and a little cooking 101 in general. You may have heard chefs say something like, the easier a recipe is, the harder it is to get right. And that's a truism, and there's a reason for it. When a recipe is simple, like a pizza dough, with just a few ingredients and just a few steps to get it done, there's kind of nothing to hide behind. Think about if you had a recipe that had 2 ingredients and you got one of the 2 ingredients wrong, that means half the recipe is wrong. Whereas if you had a recipe with 10 ingredients and you got 1 wrong, that means only 1/10 of the recipe is wrong. So that's the reason that simple things can come off as hard, because you have to get each of the ingredients and each of the steps correct. When you make a mistake, it shows up in the final product. And I'm saying that because we're coming into a small discussion about equipment. Now, pizzerias are a very specific thing. They have specific equipment. I've adapted this recipe to not work in a restaurant, but to work in your home kitchen. And I only require 2 pieces of equipment for that, but you are going to need them to make a pizzeria style pizza at home. One is something that a lot of people have. It's either a baking stone or a baking steel. The difference is, one is obviously made out of ceramic and the other is made out of carbon steel. A lot of folks have the stone, and if you have the stone, that's totally fine. You can use it. If you don't have anything yet and you're going to buy one of these, I recommend the steel, and there's a reason for that. Stone is great for brick ovens that run at 800-900 degrees Fahrenheit, but they transfer the heat more slowly because they work at those high temperatures. Your home oven is only 500-550. The steel transfers the heat a little bit quicker. It gives you that pizza oven feeling from your lower temperature home oven. But a stone will work just fine. If you have a choice, go with the steel. That's what I'm doing here today. The one other piece of equipment we need is a pan for a pizza. I have this one. This is actually an original pan from my dad's restaurant. It's probably more than 30 years old. You can see it's somewhat blackened from use, and that's great. That's seasoning. We're going to talk about that in a second. But it is thin. It's thin aluminum. That may seem cheap, and these are cheap. They're about $5. But we want that thin aluminum because it's going to heat up super fast. It's going to transfer that heat to the dough and give us what we call oven spring, where the pizza rises in the oven. A thick pan is going to take too long to heat up. Now, if you don't have one of these, I put a link down in the description to get one off Amazon. It's a little bit nicer than this. It's non-stick, so you won't have to season it. And it's like $15. You guys, once you try this pizza, you're going to be making pizza night every weekend. Your kids are going to be asking for it. Your family's going to be asking for it. Investing in a pan that you can use for the rest of your life, totally worth it. But I know some folks are going to try and do this recipe with whatever pan they have at home. And that's when that first discussion comes into play, where I said if you change small things in a simple recipe, it can have a big effect on the outcome. So, do not put this dough in a glass or ceramic pie pan. It's not going to heat through fast enough. It's not going to cook right. If you have to go something like a pie pan, these cake pans that are made of, thin aluminum, like that pan, that's your best option because it's going to heat up really quick. But this is a 9-inch. This is the one that I have for cakes in my house. You need a 12-inch. This is a 12-inch pan. This recipe is for a dough that fits in a 12-inch pan. That means it'll get stretched out to the right thickness in a 12-inch pan. If you try and jam it into a 9-inch, it's going to be way too thick. It's not going to cook right. So make sure that if you get one of these, it's a 12-inch. Then, I know some folks, and I understand why people might want to do this. You've seen people on the internet, you've seen people on YouTube making cast iron pan pizzas, and they come out looking good, but those recipes are designed for a cast iron pan, and this recipe is not. This is the Bobby Cal's pizza recipe that I promised, and it's designed for these thinner pans. If you insist upon using a cast iron, which takes a long time to heat up, you are going to leave out, and I can't guarantee results for this. This is just me trying to help you if you really are going to insist on cast iron pan, which I don't recommend. If you're going into cast iron, you're going to leave out the stone, leave out the steel, not going to use them. You're going to put that cast iron directly onto the bottom deck of your oven, not on a rack, because you got to heat it through quickly. That's a thick piece of iron. Right onto the deck of the oven, leave it there, close the door, and look and watch for the pizza to start to puff up. When it starts to puff up, pull it off the bottom of the oven, put it on a rack so the bottom of the pizza doesn't burn, because at that point the pan is heated through. But I really recommend get one of these pans. You can get these $5 ones at restaurant supply stores. I know you may not have a restaurant supply store. Use the Amazon link for the $15 one. It's non-stick. If you get the cheap version, it has to be seasoned. It's a one-step process. You oil it, you pop it in your oven, and then it's non-stick for good. I put the directions to that down below. Really easy to do, but make sure if you don't have a non-stick pan and it's brand new, you do season it. Otherwise, your pizza is going to be stuck in that pan and you won't be able to get it out. That is my lecture on equipment. I know it was a bit long. I wanted to get all the details in there for how you can turn your home oven into a pizzeria style oven. And it only takes 2 pieces of equipment and they will last you a lifetime. It has been 2 hours. Our bulk ferment is done. And what I mean by bulk ferment is there's going to be 2 fermentations for this dough. This is our first one, the bulk, which means we keep the whole dough ball together to ferment it. Now here we only have 1 dough ball. I'm only making 1 pizza. But as I said earlier, this recipe is infinitely expandable. You can do 2, 4, 6, as many as you want. Hello, Zanzibar, my cat. You may have just heard him whine. You can do as many dough balls as you want. So during this first ferment, you're keeping the whole dough ball together. If you have 2 or 3 or whatever, that's a bulk ferment. Now is the point where you would divide it up into equal dough balls, and then you have your 2, 3, 4 pizzas or whatever. But we only have 1 today. The other thing about this is the point where if you don't want to make your pizza today, you can refrigerate your dough at this point. You divide it up into your dough balls, put them into any airtight container, pop them in the fridge. You can keep them for up to 4 days and they will be good to go to make pizza after that. Let's get a look at our dough. That looks perfect. That is doubled in size. Give it a little press. You can see it bounces back a little, but it leaves an indent where my finger was. That's how you know you have the perfect amount of fermentation time, and by that doubling in size. We are going to oil our pan first. I've got some avocado oil. You can use any neutral oil that has a high smoke point. Canola works, vegetable oil works. I like avocado. Little brush. We're not going crazy with the oil because we have a seasoned pan, so it's non-stick. And if you put too much oil, it's really hard. When you start to press the pizza out, it'll want to contract back if you have too much oil. But just enough, just 1 wipe with a brush, will make the perfect amount of friction for your dough. We're going to get our pizza off the board. No problem. That's a properly kneaded dough. Look at that. We didn't need any flour on there. It came off clean. We've got a smooth dough. We're reballing it now. We knock the gas out a little bit. We're not going crazy. Little bubbles on the surface you can just pop. We're leaving some of that gas in, but we're just going to reball and retighten the dough. If you have multiple dough balls, you've now divided it up, and you're going to do this exact same thing. Reball, retighten. Make sure you have a nice tight dough ball. Onto your oiled pan, we're going to cover it back up. Our second ferment should take about 1 hour, but it might be as short as 45 minutes. We just want to see it double in size 1 more time, and then we're going to make our pie. Our pizza is doing its last rise. While that's happening, we're going to start our oven preheat, and we're going to start to preheat our pizza stone or pizza steel. Stone or steel is going to go on the deck of the oven, the very bottom, not on a rack. We want it right on the heat. It's going to load up with tons of heat energy, and that is going to cause our pizza to rise and get a nice airy crust. So I've got this preheating 500 degrees for the full last hour while this pizza does its last rise. And while that's happening, we're gonna make our sauce. A real simple sauce here, guys. We've just got some simple tomato puree and a little bit of seasoning. Salt, sugar, and pepper goes right in. And then we have dried basil, dried oregano. Yes, we do use the dry here. It works really well in this recipe. Granulated onion and granulated garlic. Now you might be wondering, what's the difference, granulated onion and granulated garlic versus the powder? Seriously, guys, don't ever buy the powder. The powder is pointless. It clumps up. It's really hard to stir in. All granulated means is that it's a little bit more coarse, like sand, and it doesn't clump, and it stirs in really easily. It doesn't give you any problems. And that, of course, is different than the dried minced, which is a completely different thing for other recipes. All we do is stir that stuff in, and your sauce is done. We don't have to cook it. It's gonna cook on the pizza. You can hold it in your fridge, but honestly, we only have a little bit longer. I'm just gonna leave it on my counter, and we will be ready to go. It's almost an hour. Our pizza is almost done, guys. We're gonna start preparing our toppings. You can have whatever toppings you want on your pizza. You know, all the typical ones. For this, I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm just gonna do cheese and pepperoni. We've got our sauce here, which we already made. We've got our mozzarella. And I am gonna use, you can use whatever pepperoni you want, but I am gonna use a stick pepperoni, an all natural stick pepperoni that I'm gonna hand cut. There's two reasons why I like to do that. One, I like to cut it a little bit thicker than those slices they give you at the store. I just think it's really nice with a thick slice of pepperoni. But more importantly than that, this has a natural casing on it. The natural casing shrinks when it cooks. That causes the pepperoni to cup up, get crispy around the edges, and then you get that little cup of spicy oil in there, and it's just so delicious on pizza. So it's a little extra step I take, but you can buy pre-sliced if you want. Let's get this cut up. Moment of truth, guys. Let's check out our final dough. Voila. Doubled in size, looking beautiful, ready to press. As we can see, similar thing to last time. You touch it, a little bit of an indent, a little bit of a bounce back. Perfect dough. We're going to start in the middle, and we're going to work our way out because we want to create a cornicione, a crust. Cornicione, the Italian word. You may need a little oil on your hands. We're going to see how sticky the dough is. Start in the middle, press it out, turn it, press it out. We're forcing that air out to the edges to form that cornicione. Really nice dough, not too sticky. I might add some oil eventually. Let's see how it goes. Now you can start, now that we have it widened out, I can start to use the edges of my hands. Just stretching the dough towards the sides, leaving extra around to form the crust. Very nice dough. Thinner in the center, thicker out towards the sides. That's what you want with a pizza. Perfect. Get it out all the way to the edge. And give it a little time. It wants to stretch slowly. Don't force it. Once we have it out there, we start to do what's called curling the pizza. This is forming the crust. The basic idea is to take your fingertips and you're going to push them down into the bottom corner where the side meets the bottom of the pan. And that causes it to stick. Now you see, it's stuck, the dough stuck to my hands, so I need a little bit of oil, because if it sticks too much to my hands, I'll pull it off the side of the pan. Put a little oil around there. I'm even going to put a little bit on like that. Smear it around. Now I'm going to pull it up the side of the pan. I'm not crushing the crust though. I'm keeping the crust. I'm just digging my fingers into that bottom part to create suction that holds that crust up. So I have this funny thing I do. You can see I'm holding the pizza up off the table. Most pizzaioli, most pizza makers don't do that. I'll tell you why. It's a funny story. I told you about my dad's restaurant. When I started making pizza, I was maybe about this tall. I had to reach up and grab the pizza like this. And this is how I would curl the pizza. And I got used to, my muscle memory got used to that motion. So I slowly grew. I literally grew up with pizza in my hands. And as I grew, I would inch by inch lift the pan higher and higher to keep the same angle that my muscle memory was used to when I first learned how to make a pizza when I was like 6 years old. So that's why I do it that weird way, and I still do it to this day, and nobody else does it that way. But yeah, it just goes to show you there's a lot of history of pizza making in this family. But we have a beautiful cornicione now, and we are ready to sauce this guy. We've got our sauce. Now I made enough sauce for the person that likes a medium to medium large amount of sauce on their pizza. Which means you can, if you're a person that likes light sauce, you can leave a little bit of this off. That is your call. Light sauce, medium heavy. It is fine by me. We just made enough so anybody can have the amount that they want. Spread it all around. We've got our cheese, of course. Try not to get too much on the edges because when it gets up on the crust, it can burn. But do get it out to the corners. Just use your fingertips, spread it out. Very nice. And that beautiful hand-cut pepperoni. I don't know, I just think for this style of pan pizza, pepperoni is like the perfect topping. But you could put anything. You could put mushrooms, olives, peppers, sausage. I do love sausage. Some good Italian sausage on here is always a beautiful thing. Our pizza is ready, guys. I'm so excited for this. I can't wait to get it in the oven. I love when my house smells like a pizzeria. The oven is preheated to 500 degrees. We got that pizza steel on the deck, and we are getting in the oven. The pizza will take about 15 minutes total to cook, but we're starting it on the bottom deck. That means it's going to be really hot underneath to give that spring. So after 10 minutes, I'm going to get a spatula under there, check the bottom. If it's getting too brown, I'll pull it, put it on the top rack, and let it finish the last 5 minutes. It has been 10 minutes. Let's give her a look. Whew, a lot of steam. Make sure you take your pizza fully out of the oven and close the door when you take a look. You don't want to let that precious heat out. These are small ovens and they can lose heat fast. Get underneath. Yeah, see that? This pizza is done on the bottom, but it's not done on top. This is how we work our oven. Even in a pizzeria, you got to work your oven. So we're going to put it back in on the very top rack. Hopefully, not too much darker on the bottom. We finish off that top. Look, we're getting some nice cupping on that pepperoni. Let's see how we're doing. Oh, that is a thing of beauty, folks. Perfectly cooked pizzeria style pepperoni pizza. Our pizza is done, guys. It is beautiful. It is perfectly cooked. It smells like a pizzeria in here. It's one of my favorite smells in the world. Brings me back to my childhood, everything I grew up with. Now, just a touch more patience. When the pizza first comes out of the oven, think about this. When you order a pizza delivery, it doesn't come out of the oven and go right into your mouth. It's going to go into a box. It's going to get delivered to your house. It's going to get a rest. That's very important. When it first comes out of the oven, it's too hard. It's too crispy. If you bit into it right now, not only is it lava hot and you're going to burn all the skin off the roof of your mouth, but more importantly than pain is texture. As the steam escapes, this crust is going to soften a little. It's going to be crunchy on the outside, chewy on the inside, and it's going to give you that perfect pizzeria bite like it got delivered to your door. Don't skip this step. We're going to be back in 10 minutes and we will cut and eat. The moment has arrived. Our rest is over. The smell has been killing me. Let's take one more look at this guy before we cut into him. Look at that beautiful pie. I love it. I can't wait to taste it. I cut this into 8 pieces, which is nice because you can cut it in halves. Cut it in half, cut it in half again, and then half again, and one more half. I think that gives you nice, even slices for this type of pizza. It's had a chance to cool. It's not too hot. All right, let me get, this looks like a good piece. No. Picking my piece was always my poison as a child. I would go, which piece is it? Which one do I want? I think this is my piece right here. Look at that guy. Let's see if we can get a close-up. Beautiful cupped pepperoni, a little bit of that spicy oil in each cup. Look at that crust, perfectly golden brown. Oh my God. You guys, it's so good. It's perfect pizza. I mean, the pepperoni cups with that little bit of spicy oil, that gooey mozzarella, and most importantly, crispy on the outside, chewy on the inside, real pizzeria style crust. Right here in your own home kitchen. It's amazing. It's a taste of my childhood. It brings back so many memories and I love it so much. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I am right now. And I hope you enjoyed learning, admittedly, a little bit of a long episode, but learning how to turn your home kitchen into a little mini pizzeria in your own house. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe so you can get more episodes of If It Ain't Broke, Don't Fix It.